I'm Chloe, 33 years old, living in Minneapolis, a city where winter seems to stretch on forever. I used to believe that if I stayed obedient, worked hard, and behaved, one day I'd finally see that proud look in my mother's eyes. I was wrong. When I was 8, I learned how to hold back tears in silence. Not because I was brave, but because no one cared enough to wipe them away. My older brother, Mason, was 3 years ahead of me and the shining star in our parents' eyes. Every time he walked into a room, the energy shifted. Conversations rerouted to revolve around his latest achievements. As for me, I got straight A's in math, followed every rule, never caused trouble. The only thing my mother said when she saw my certificate was, "Why don't you try some extracurriculars like Mason?" My younger sister, Lily, is 5 years younger than me, with wide brown eyes and a voice as soft as spring wind. Whenever she spilled milk or tore a book, Mom would laugh, pat her head, and say, "She's just a baby, so cute." But if I forgot to fold my blanket, my dad would shout from downstairs, "Chloe, you think growing up means you get to be lazy?" When I was 11, my school hosted a science creativity contest. I spent 3 weeks building a solar system model using foam balls and string. I stayed up late painting planets, researching fun facts for the presentation. The morning I turned it in, I felt so proud I could burst. But that night, I came home to find it smashed, planets scattered all over the living room carpet. I turned to Mason, the only one home. He shrugged. "Don't cry. Mom told me not to let the house get messy." "Why'd you leave it out?" Mom stepped out from the kitchen, glanced at the mess, and said flatly, "Chloe, how many times do I have to tell you to keep things tidy? Don't blame others when you're careless." I froze in place while Mason grabbed a cookie and flashed a triumphant grin. That wasn't the last time. Through middle and high school, I stayed in the top 3 of my class. When I brought home my outstanding student certificate, excited, Mom glanced at it and laid it on the kitchen counter. "I'm taking Mason to a scholarship interview tomorrow. Make dinner for yourself, okay?" Every achievement of mine was either minimized or turned into a comparison. One day I made the state debate team. On the ride home, I imagined Mom's smile, imagined hearing, "I'm proud of you." Instead, she frowned, "Does that team take up a lot of your time? You should focus on college apps like Mason did." I never understood why I always had to fade into the background. It wasn't because I was less capable. I just didn't make noise. I didn't chase attention. But in that house, if you didn't overwhelm the room, you were invisible. Mason was the opposite. He never missed a chance to step on someone else to get ahead. In 12th grade, there was a boy in my class named Jack whom I really liked. We studied together, walked home after school. But on Valentine's Day, Jack suddenly messaged me an apology, saying he'd heard some things from my brother. I asked Mason what he said. He smirked. "I just told him the truth. He's not right for you. You deserve someone more serious." That truth turned out to be a blatant lie. Mason told Jack I was secretly dating someone else behind his back. No one checked. No one asked me. No one cared when I cried in the bathroom past midnight. My dad, Thomas, was quiet, always avoiding conflict. He'd say, "Family's family. Don't let small things ruin the bond." But small things piled up like snow on a roof, until it collapsed. One night I snapped during dinner. "Why does everyone stay silent when I'm treated unfairly?" My mother set her spoon down, didn't even look at me. "Stop making a big deal, Chloe. You always act like the victim." Mason chuckled, murmuring, "Here we go again." I sat there feeling like a ghost in my own family. If you've ever watched the people closest to you ignore your presence, not because you're invisible but because they choose not to see you, you'll understand. It's not sadness. It's a kind of suffocating quiet. You start wondering if you're just a side character in the story of your own life. That's where I grew up, between indifferent glances, praise that always landed elsewhere, and wounds that didn't bleed but cut all the same. But that wasn't the end, just the beginning of a long journey I'd eventually learn. Sometimes to have a seat in a family, you have to stand up and walk away from the table they set. Last fall, when the leaves turned golden across Edina, I got an email from work. I was promoted to project director for an eco-urban development in the city's West End. I'd been with the project for nearly 2 years. Through every private meeting and blueprint revision, every line adjusted down to the square inch. Something cracked open inside me that day, not because of the title but because I was finally seen. Not at home. Somewhere else. I thought, maybe Mom will be proud this time. I imagined her saying, "Well done, Chloe." I imagined Thanksgiving dinner at my uncle's ranch in Stillwater. Warm fireplace, the smell of pumpkin pie, soft yellow lights wrapping around the wooden beams. I imagined telling my story and, for once, Mason staying quiet. When I walked in carrying a bottle of red wine and homemade raisin bread, Mom barely glanced at me. "Oh, you made it. Good. Mason's just telling us about his new house." In the living room, everyone was gathered around Mason. He was bragging about his new villa in Palm Springs, the 20-foot pool, the imported Italian stone kitchen, the crystal chandelier custom-made by some artist in Chicago. Everyone oohed and awed. My cousin Emily gasped when Mason showed the bathtub with built-in hydro jets. I stood there, still holding the bread, then quietly placed it beside the turkey tray. Mom walked over, adjusted the table runner and said, "Is Mason proposing to Jess soon? She's so sweet and successful." Before I could open my mouth, my uncle chimed in, "And Lily? She's planning a spring wedding in Napa Valley. Sounds like a dream." When I finally spoke, my voice soft but hopeful, "I just got promoted to project director." My aunt cut in, asking Mason, "So, is that house available for short-term rental? I want to take my prayer group on a retreat." No one asked where I worked or how I felt. Mom nodded as if I'd mentioned it might snow tomorrow. That night, while washing dishes, I overheard Mom say to Aunt Vivian in the kitchen, "What did Chloe say? Something about being a lead or whatever. She lives alone in the city anyway, of course she works a lot." I stood at the doorway, still holding the dish towel. I used to be close to my cousin Jenna. Closer than anyone. We used to share beds during holidays, split makeup, paint each other's nails in Grandma's bathroom. But everything shifted after Grandma passed 2 years ago. She was the only one who never compared me to Mason. She had a silver oval locket with a photo of my great-grandmother inside, passed down through 3 generations. Grandma used to say, "When you really need strength, wear this. It'll remind you where you come from, and what you deserve." I remember every word like it was etched into my skin. After the funeral, I went back to Grandma's room, intending to retrieve the locket she had promised me. But it was gone. The next day, Jenna wore it around her neck, the silver chain gleaming against her sweater. I walked over, calmly asked, "That necklace, did Grandma give it to you?" Jenna blinked, then hesitated. "Yeah, she gave it to me right before she passed. Told me to keep it safe and not tell anyone." Her words slid out smoothly like she'd rehearsed them. "I told my mother." He shrugged. "Are you sure you're not mistaken? You've been a little emotional lately." My father tapped the table and said, "She's gone. Let it go. It's just a small piece of jewelry anyway." After that, Jenna avoided me. Every time she entered a room, the air changed. Awkward hugs. Eyes that wouldn't meet mine. The tipping point was that Christmas. She walked into the party with the locket shining bright on her chest, dangling like a silent declaration, "I have it and you don't." Everything didn't just crack. It split open inch by inch. I stopped calling every weekend. I gave up the habit of mailing birthday cards. The lessons from Dr. Leslie, my therapist, began to sink in. Not everyone deserves a permanent seat in your trust. But back then I still wasn't ready to leave the table. I still hoped that maybe one day Mason would say, "Chloe's actually doing really well." Or Jenna would hand the locket back. Or my mother would take my hand and say, "I'm proud of you." I didn't know the moment of clarity wouldn't come with an apology, but with an empty chair where I should have been sitting. But that came later. For now, I was still standing in that cabin, among stories I didn't belong to, listening to laughter that never turned toward me. I started seeing Dr. Rachel Stanton on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, just as the light at Franklin Corner turned yellow and traffic piled up like the whole city was tired at once. Her office was on the 3rd floor of an old red brick building, a tiny lobby scented with orange essential oils, and a wall clock ticking like a heartbeat in quiet recovery. I sat on the gray upholstered chair, fingers woven together, eyes lowered. "Chloe, what brings you here today?" Stanton's voice was gentle like night mist but not weak. I sighed, staring at the carpet's spiral pattern. "I feel like a stranger in my own family. And it's slowly killing off the last good parts of me." That's where we started. Each session peeled back a new layer from the past. The time Mason made up stories about me to get me isolated in middle school. How my mother always defended him, calling his insults just teasing. The phone calls I had to cut short because of the long, drawn-out sighs from the other end. Stanton never judged. She just took notes, sometimes nodded. But over time she began pointing out things I'd never dared to consider. That constant dismissal wasn't just me being too sensitive, it was emotional neglect. That my chronic guilt over setting boundaries was the result of being raised to be the accommodating one, no matter the cost. And most importantly, that I had the right to stop, to walk away, and to need no further proof to be worthy of love. I remember one morning after I'd told the story about Grandma's locket, Dr. Stanton leaned forward and asked gently, "Have you ever wondered why they believed Jenna so easily even though your connection was clearer?" I let out a dry laugh. Because I was never the chosen one. I was just convenient to blame. She nodded. "And do you think that will change if you keep sacrificing the truth just to be accepted?" I didn't answer. But that day when I stepped out of her office, I didn't look back like I usually did. Even so, I still clung to one illusion, that if I just tried one more time, picked the right moment, showed enough sincerity, maybe they'd see me differently. Stanton had been clear. Manipulative people rarely change unless they're forced to face consequences. But my heart wasn't ready to close the door permanently. And then Christmas approached. My mom texted one late evening, "Dinner's at 6 at Aunt Nora's. Mason and Lily are bringing dessert. Can you handle the main dish? She wants turkey." No check-in. No one asked how I was doing in Minneapolis, how my big project was going, or whether I had anyone to spend Christmas with. I read the message, then flipped my phone face down. 3 minutes later, I picked it up and replied, "Okay. I'll be there." I decided I wouldn't show up empty-handed. I'd bring the gifts I had prepared, thoughtful, meaningful ones for each person. But there was one special package. It was wrapped separately in indigo paper with a silver ribbon, meant for Mason. Inside wasn't a gift but the truth. Screenshots of his messages mocking me to his friends, laughing at my career, a voice recording of him telling Jenna, "Grandma never trusted Chloe," a lie designed to steal the last thing that mattered to me. I wrote a short note. "I don't need your affection. I just need you to know, I saw everything." Stanton had said, "Confrontation doesn't always lead to change. But sometimes it's the first step toward your own freedom." I understood that more clearly than ever. The night before Christmas, I packed everything, checked the small envelope tucked beneath the gift wrap. I felt anxious, but no longer expectant. Like someone returning to an old house. Not to stay but to make sure nothing of theirs was left behind. The next morning I left early, driving nearly an hour through blinding snow to reach Aunt Nora's lakeside estate. A house that had hosted countless parties where I played the invisible role. I arrived 15 minutes early, turkey tray in one hand, the gift bag in the other. Aunt Nora opened the door, her eyes scanning me like she was counting inventory. "Chloe, right on time. Everyone's in the kitchen. Come in." I stepped into the house glowing with lights, filled with the scent of mulled wine and vintage Christmas songs. No one looked up. Mason was telling a story that made the whole room erupt in laughter. Lily was busy posting pictures of the tree. I walked straight to the dining table, set the tray down, and quietly slid the silver gift into Mason's designated seat. And then I stood there, in a room full of people, feeling colder than the January wind outside. I took a deep breath. That Christmas would be unlike the others. Not because they'd changed, but because I had stopped hoping they would. The dress I wore that night was sapphire blue, with a V-neck and a silhouette tailored just for me. I had it custom-made, not to draw attention but to remind myself that even in a house that forgot me, I still had value. My hair was softly curled, my heels a quiet cream, a touch of red on my lips, just enough to face them. I arrived at exactly 6 p.m., the time listed in the message Mom sent. Snow blanketed the road leading to Aunt Nora's house, and warm yellow lights glowing through the windows made the place look like an old-fashioned Christmas card. I walked in holding a tray of roasted chestnut butter tarts and a carefully wrapped gift bag. Inside, everything unfolded like a play that had been rehearsed in advance. "Mason, tell that story again." "The part with the resort manager," someone shouted between bursts of laughter. All eyes turned to Mason, still the center, still the shadow that swallowed everything else. I stepped into the living room as if no one noticed. Mom brushed past me and said quickly, "Put the tarts in the kitchen, okay? Careful not to mess up the tablecloth." Then she turned and beamed at Lily's friend. "A guy named Carson, I think." I set the tarts down and walked back to the main hall, glancing around the room full of voices. No one asked how I'd been. No one mentioned the gift I brought. I carried the tray like a volunteer caterer. When it was time to sit, everyone moved into the dining room, where a long table had been meticulously prepared. Deep red linens, silver candles, crystal glasses, and monogrammed flatware. I stood near the end of the table searching for my name card. Nothing. I walked slowly around. There were places set for Aunt Nora, Uncle Hank, Mason and his new girlfriend, a blonde named Amber, Lily, Carson, my parents, Jenna, even my 17-year-old cousin. But not me. I returned to the kitchen and stopped Mom as she sprinkled parsley over the roast. Mom, I don't see my name at the table. She didn't look up. Oh, it's a bit tight, so you'll use the side table in the garage. Your aunt already set it up with plates and glasses. It's just temporary. The garage. I repeated, my voice quiet but firm. Like, the actual garage? It's freezing out there. He set the spoon down. You're being too sensitive, Chloe. This is a family gathering. Don't make a scene. I turned away. In my head I heard something crack. I walked back to the dining room and stood in the doorway. No one turned to look. They were already seated, Mason next to Dad, Lily scrolling under the table. On Mason's plate sat the gift I brought. Silver paper, indigo ribbon, untouched, unnoticed. I spoke up. Where's my seat? No immediate response. Amber stopped chewing, glanced at Mason, then looked down. Mom called out as if from a distance, you're in the garage. We're too many this year. I looked straight at Mason. You think that's fair? He raised an eyebrow, leaned back. Honestly, why waste a chair on someone nobody remembers? Silence. No clinking cutlery. No protest. Even Jenna just stared at the napkin twisting in her hands. No one moved. No one said no. I nodded. All right. I stepped to the table, picked up the silver package and deliberately placed it right in front of Mason. I made sure everyone could see. I prepared this for you. Don't worry, it's not a tie. I smiled faintly. It's a few things you forgot to delete. Mason frowned slightly, but before he could react, I turned and walked toward the hallway, straight for the front door. No one followed. No one called my name. I stepped out into the cold, snow dusting the hem of my coat. My car was parked along the curb, and through the frosted window, I saw my own reflection. The woman in the blue dress with no seat at her family's table. I got into the car and started the engine. My hands stung from the chill, then slowly warmed under the heater's breath. In the passenger seat was a bag of gingerbread cookies I'd made for Lily, along with a handwritten card. I hope you find happiness without pretending. I didn't cry. There was only a hollowness, but not empty. More like a frozen lake. So, thought. Unshaken by the same old winds. I didn't go back to that dinner. I drove straight to the city center and turned into a small hotel called Timberlane, where I had booked a room in advance. One with a balcony facing the park. In my suitcase I packed only a notebook, a few skincare items and Grandma's locket, a replica I made from old photos. When I stepped into the lobby, the manager asked, "Do you have a reservation?" I smiled softly. "I do. Chloe Sanders. Just one guest." The front desk clerk handed me the key with a kind look. "Have a peaceful night, Sanders." I nodded and entered the elevator. A Christmas night that wasn't crowded, noisy, or flashy, but peaceful. I no longer needed to force myself into a seat that was never set for me. I turned around. Not to go to the garage. Not back to the car. I turned toward the dining room, the one lit by flickering candles, as if waiting for the final scene of a play whose lead actress hadn't spoken yet. I opened the door with my whole hand, not meek, not waiting for anyone to notice. Conversations stopped. The entire crowded room seemed to freeze. All eyes turned to me, some surprised, others trying to look unaffected. I walked to Mason, neither slow nor rushed. The silver package in my hand, its edges still sharp, its surface still pristine, just like all the times I tried to keep myself from breaking. I placed it in front of him, gently, like leaving evidence at a crime scene. "Mason," I said, voice loud enough for no one to pretend they didn't hear. "I brought this for you." He smirked. "Farewell gift." I tilted my head, locking eyes with the mask he always wore. "No. It's a reveal." My mother stood up. "Chloe. Not here. This is Christmas dinner, not your personal drama." I didn't turn. Didn't answer her. I looked only at Mason, then pointed to the edge of his porcelain plate. You should check under your plate before you laugh. Mason paused. His hand lifted the plate. Underneath, just as I'd placed it, was a sealed envelope with his name written in my handwriting. His lips tightened. You know exactly what's in there, I said, voice calm. You know what you wrote, what you sent, the messages, the recordings, the lies you spread through this family like weeds. Amber glanced at the envelope, then at him. You gonna open it? Mason hesitated. It's private, he said sharply. Then snatched the envelope and shoved it into his coat pocket, like garbage he was ashamed to be caught holding. I shifted my gaze to the others. My dad stared at his wine glass like it might answer for him. Lily bit her lower lip, her eyes flickering. Jenna pretended to adjust the tablecloth while Aunt Nora bent down to double-check the forks. No one stood up. No one said, stop. No one said, Chloe's right. I inhaled deeply through my nose and nodded, like someone finally accepting a truth they didn't want to believe. You said I was unstable, I continued. You said I didn't deserve anyone. You made Jack leave me, made my friends doubt me, made the whole family believe I was a problem to be removed. I stepped back and straightened up. That's enough. Mason shot to his feet, glaring. Are you done? I gave a faint smile. I haven't even started. I turned toward Mom. You said I was too sensitive. Imaginative. But did you ever ask how it felt when no one looked at me like I belonged at this table? No one answered. I looked back at Mason. You should keep that envelope. Because 3 copies were sent out. 1 to my lawyer, 1 to Rachel, your ex-fiancée, and 1 waiting in a safe deposit box, just in case you still think manipulation is a fun little game. No one laughed anymore. I stepped away from the table. The sound of my heels against the hardwood rang out clear in the silence of people who once called me family. Merry Christmas, I said softly, like the final breath of someone walking out of a burning house. I turned. No one stopped me. Through the glass door I saw snow falling across the path. I opened it, stepped out, and felt the cold wind sweep across the back of my neck like the universe patting me on the shoulder. Finally, it's time to go. I didn't drive away immediately. I stood there for a few minutes, listening as the scattered laughter inside slowly resumed, faint, forced. I knew that dinner would never be the same. No longer whole. I had removed myself from the performance, but the crack I left behind would spread. I got in the car and turned on the heater. The street lamp cast my reflection onto the windshield. A woman still wearing a blue dress, but no longer waiting for anyone to offer her a seat. No longer sitting on the edge of hope. I checked in at the Oak Ridge Inn just before 8 p.m. with snow still drifting from the sky. The front desk clerk, a young woman named Bree, greeted me with a smile that didn't feel forced. She didn't ask why someone in a party dress showed up alone on Christmas night. She just handed me the key and said, if you need hot tea or a snack, just dial 0. The room was on the 2nd floor with a window facing the town square. Outside, a tall tree glowed with soft golden lights, and couples passed by arm in arm like a living oil painting. I hung the dress over a chair, washed my face with warm water, and ordered the dinner they advertised as Christmas set for 1, honey roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, herb butter vegetables, and a serving of crisp apple pie. I sat by the window, legs wrapped in a light blanket, hands cupped around a mug of chamomile tea, watching the night stretch out before me. For the first time in years, I wasn't having Christmas dinner out of obligation. I wasn't sitting on the edge of a table waiting for a question, a glance. Here silence was just silence. Less than half an hour after I left Aunt Nora's house, my phone began buzzing non-stop. The first text was from Lily. Chloe, are you okay? Everyone's freaking out. Next was from Rachel, Mason's fiancée. I'm reading what was in the envelope. Is it true all of this came from Mason? I set the phone aside, not replying. The screen lit up again and again like the pulse of someone else's chaos. The people still trapped in the storm I had just walked out of. After dinner, I turned my phone back on. 3 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Dad. Mom's texts came in like a flood. What did you think you were doing making a scene like that? Mason says you made it all up. He already tore everything up. If you come back right now and apologize, I'm sure everyone will let it go. I read each word without anger. Just emptiness. Mom still thought all of this was my fault. Not because she believed it, but because it made everything easier for her to accept. The last message from Rachel: "We need to talk. I'm not the only one Mason's manipulated." I didn't respond that night. I needed to hold on to this sense of peace. A cold night, but not a lonely one. The next morning, as pale winter light slipped through the curtains, I received 2 more texts. One from Jenna: "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you." I read the stuff Rachel forwarded. "If you're willing, I'd like to meet on Saturday. No talk about the locket, just real talk." One from Dad: "I should have said something. Last night, all I could do was stare at the table and feel ashamed." I set the phone down. It felt like standing outside a fire watching the smoke rise from the ashes. I didn't need to go back and check the damage. They were seeing it themselves one by one. That afternoon, I returned to Minneapolis and unlocked my 7th-floor apartment. No one waiting, no questions asked. Just a space I built where I set the rules. No one to silence me for the sake of appearances. No one telling me to give up my seat because he's the oldest son. Rachel video called on Monday night. I answered. She didn't cry or rage. She just looked tired. "Chloe," she said, "he told me so many things about you, that you were moody, unstable, that your school once flagged you for behavior." I gave a dry laugh. "Yeah, I've heard that one before." She sighed. "But after reading what he wrote to his friends, about how he made your boyfriend leave, how he pushed you out of parties, I just want to know, how did you put up with it for so long?" I shrugged. "Because I used to think if I tried just a little harder, they'd change." She nodded. "I broke off the engagement this morning." I stayed silent. "Not because of you," Rachel added, "but because I realized I was repeating your story. At first, I thought Mason was just cocky. But the more time passed, the more I found myself apologizing for things I didn't even do." Before ending the call, Rachel said something I'll never forget: "Thank you for not staying quiet." That night, I curled up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, jazz playing softly in the background. Outside, the snow still fell. I thought about the new year ahead. Whether Mom would call. What tricks Mason might try to save face. None of it mattered anymore. 3 days after Christmas, I got a text from Jenna at 6 a.m. Just 2 short lines: "I want to see you. I don't have the necklace anymore." I read the message over and over in the soft light of dawn, sitting upright against the headboard, the phone cold in my hands. No explanations, no excuses, no blame. The phrase "don't have it anymore" could have meant she lost it, or that she chose to let it go. I didn't ask. I simply replied, "Larchmont Cafe, Friday afternoon, 3 o'clock." That afternoon, Jenna arrived early. She sat at the window table wearing an ivory sweater, her hair tied low, face bare of makeup. When I walked in, she stood, pulled a small velvet box from her purse and placed it on the table. I don't have anything to say except I believed the wrong person. I didn't touch the box right away. "What did he tell you?" "That you didn't care about Grandma. That she rewrote her will because you were too unstable." Jenna let out a bitter laugh. And I believed it. Because everyone was programmed to believe whatever Mason said. I opened the box. Grandma's pendant was intact. No wear, no scratches. Just like my heart. Not broken, just buried deep. Jenna took a breath. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just hope you'll open the door again if I ever knock." I nodded. No promises, but I didn't shut it either. That same week, I received an email from Rachel. The subject line read, "Officially filed." The message was short. Rachel wrote that she had moved out of the shared apartment, hired her own attorney, and wasn't backing down. "What he did to you," she wrote, "was just the tip. The part underneath, I lived with every day." I waited before responding. I saved the email in a folder labeled "Survival Evidence." Even though I didn't need it legally, I wanted to keep it, as proof that clarity had finally arrived. On Saturday morning, my phone buzzed. It was Dad. I almost declined the call, but after a few seconds, I lifted it to my ear. "Chloe," his voice was low, laced with a sigh. "I'm not calling to defend Mason. I'm calling to say I was wrong." I stayed silent. I thought if I kept quiet, things would stay calm. But the quieter I stayed, the lonelier you got. I saw you walk out on Christmas and I stayed seated. As I was weak. I chose comfort over fairness. "I don't need your apology," I said. "I just need you to stop pretending. Then, if you'll allow it, I'd like to take you to lunch next week." Not to fix things, just to listen. I agreed on one condition: no talk about mom, no justifications. My mother didn't call again. She sent one message: every family has conflicts. You're making a big deal out of nothing. I didn't respond. Not out of anger, just exhaustion. She still used the same tone, treating hurt as accidental, treating pain as something daughters should accept without question. After lunch with Dad, he pulled an old leather notebook from his coat pocket. I found this in your grandmother's things. It's her journal. I opened the first page. Grandma's cursive handwriting appeared. Chloe has eyes like my mother. I hope no one ever dims that light. I held the notebook like a song long forgotten, now suddenly playing again. Her other entries spoke of watching me at art competitions, believing I'd build the first house in the family. He had never forgotten me. I turned to Dad. Thank you for not hiding this. He just nodded. For the first time in my life, I saw that man look smaller, but more real. As for Lily, the sister who had always stayed quiet and avoided confrontation, she suddenly sent me a 3-page email. In it, she admitted she had witnessed Mason fabricating things, had read his mocking messages about me, but chose to ignore them. I thought silence was harmless, she wrote. Now I know silence is a form of complicity too. At the end of the letter, Lily offered, if you're willing, I'd like to start over. Not as family. Just as strangers learning how to be kind. I didn't reply right away. But I added her number to my approved list. Like a door left slightly open waiting for the right knock. I no longer attend every family gathering. I choose to show up only where I don't have to bow my head or bite my tongue to keep the peace. The only places I go are my regular coffee spot, Rachel's apartment when she invites me for dinner, and Friday brunches with Dad at Barrel's Bakery. The rest I've left behind. Not out of bitterness, but because I need space to grow, without shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. Spring came late in Minneapolis, but when the snow finally melted, I replaced all the curtains in my apartment with soft yellow ones instead of the usual neutral grays. I took down all the family photos in the hallway and replaced them with snapshots I had taken on work trips. The steel bridge in Pittsburgh, an old brick wall in Philadelphia, a green rooftop project in Portland. Every new detail placed in my home served a single purpose. Not a refuge, but a space to live fully as myself. I cleaned out my wardrobe too. The tucked-in blouses Mom once praised as elegant were gone. In their place, high-neck jersey dresses, loose jeans, soft linen shirts in earthy tones. I no longer dressed to be accepted at family dinners. I dressed to feel at home in my own skin. Work shifted too. After Christmas, the architecture firm where I worked, Hollow Baxter, won the bid for the Midtown Green Spine project, a mixed-use complex with renewable energy integration. In our first meeting, I pitched a design using recycled concrete and double-insulated glass. The lead architect listened carefully and said, "Chloe, you're leading the sustainable design team. We need minds like yours." Before, I would have hesitated, waited for confirmation. Now I looked him in the eye and said, "I'm in." That project was also where I met Michael. He wasn't flashy, tall and lean, brown hair, thin wireframe glasses. He was the environmental engineer from a partner firm in charge of emissions assessments. During our third meeting, when I presented the stormwater drainage system integrated with greenery, he nodded slightly and said, "Smart idea. Balancing tech with landscape. That's rare." We started talking more. First through work emails, then texts. One afternoon he asked me for coffee at a spot near the construction site. "I used to think you were kind of cold," he said, stirring his peppermint tea. "I used to think you'd say I was too ambitious like everyone else," I replied, lips tilted into a half-smile. Michael laughed. Looks like we were both wrong. There was no rush between us. No pressure in our coffee dates or long walks after work. He told me about his mom raising him and his brother alone in Fargo. I told him about the locket and why I never wore it daily, only when I felt strong enough. Gradually, Michael became the person I texted not for answers but for stillness. He never tried to fix me. Never soothed me with canned advice. He listened, asked only when needed, and knew when to stay quiet. Outside of Michael, I began forming a small but solid circle. Rachel, after leaving Mason, moved to St. Paul. We met once a month. Sometimes to cook, sometimes just to watch a movie in silence. Our history wasn't smooth, but neither of us pretended it was. We rebuilt on truth, not assumptions. Jenna didn't disappear after that first coffee. She sent me a feature she wrote about women in architecture. She used my real name. I didn't text her back right away, but I read every word, especially the quote she pulled from a past interview with me. They told me to be softer because it's a man's industry. But no one asked what emotion I design from. My father still kept our meeting schedule. Every other week he showed up 10 minutes early, always carrying either a worn book or a newspaper with an architecture column he thought was your taste. He never mentioned my mother and I never asked how she was. It was a silent agreement for now. I didn't attend the family Easter gathering. I didn't send my mom a birthday card either. Not out of anger. Just because I was done playing the role of the good daughter in a play that no longer fit. That Christmas I chose to host dinner, with Michael, Rachel, Jenna, and my dad, at my apartment. I made vegetarian lasagna from scratch. Jenna brought a quinoa salad. Rachel came with a bottle of handcrafted apple cider. Michael handled the music. His playlist was all jazz from the 70s. At the table, no one fought for attention. No one interrupted. No one was sidelined. I sat at the head of the table. Candlelight flickered over a framed photo of my grandmother, now hung on the brightest wall in my apartment. The silver locket rested on my collarbone, catching the light every time I leaned forward to pass the greens. No one mentioned my mother, Mason, or those who once made me shrink. That table wasn't grand or long. But there I didn't have to fight for a seat. I wasn't pushed away or treated like a burden. I was present, and I belonged. Chloe's story is a powerful reminder that family isn't always where we come from, but where we're seen, heard, and valued. She didn't waste time trying to fix those who dismissed her. She built her own table, one where she always has a seat, no permission needed. In real life, some relationships must be left behind to preserve our inner wholeness. Because growing up isn't just about forgiving, it's about setting boundaries and choosing the right people to move forward with. What do you think about Chloe's choice? Would you have the courage to walk away from relationships that no longer serve you? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to follow this channel for more deep and moving family stories.